So I wrote a midrash this week. I don't know if any of you are familiar with what a midrash actually is or where they come from. They were designed first by the rabbis, primarily in the early Second Temple period, though they may have actually been written even before, where the rabbis would take a verse or a person that they would craft into a story, and in doing so, they would have some commentary. So I'm sure you'll figure out what this story is about, though it's based on this week's portion, a story that many of us are familiar with, the story of Abraham. And I want us to kind of think about Abraham, but in a different context. Let's imagine for a minute that Abraham, who, as we know, heard a voice, moved his family, buried his father, kept going into Israel, survived many challenges. Each one of those challenges, whether it was drought, a war with kings, getting back his cousin, whether he was struggling to even produce a child, or what the relationship, as I'm sure things were not wonderful between Hagar and Sarah at all times. And yet here he is, after all of those struggles. He has a house, he has everything that he wants, but he has a harebrained idea to sacrifice his son. And he's so convinced that he's heard God's voice that he goes along and he does it. And he ignores everybody else. It's this son, the one he loves the most, Isaac, that he picks. And he doesn't even tell Sarah what's happening. By the way, in case you're curious, in this dream that Abraham's having, it's so stunning that he keeps going with it. But somehow Sarah figures it out, and she's so stunned, she dies. All in an effort to get Abraham to wake up. Abraham's continuing, and his servants are with him in the desert as he's continuing. And still, they kind of question him. And still, Abraham doesn't wake up. He's in this delusion. And his son is questioning him. And still, Abraham just doesn't quite wake up. He's still in his dream. He's still in his delusion. And finally, these two angels, at the very moment when Abraham was going to do as his dream had instructed him, do as the world, the delusional space that he was living in most convinced him, he was about to kill Isaac, the angels step in. But it wasn't one that took to wake him up to the reality that he was living in. It was two. But the ripple effects of the damage that he had done were significant. As we now know, Sarah was gone, she had died. Isaac never, ever spoke to his dad again. And he, in a way, lost what he had. He started a brand new family and went on a different path. And it took Isaac years to recover. And my midrash asks the question, of course, about denial. Denial is, after all, a powerful force. Many of us have, at times, been reassured by our own sitting in our own delusions, because sometimes the truth is painful, and sometimes the world is scary. And yet, reality frequently and thankfully pierces our delusion. We do know that denial psychologically comforts us. And yet for many of us will sit in that comfort, not wanting to look up. Reminds me, by the way, of a teaching of a Hasidic rabbi, Rabbi Mendel of Kotz, who has a dialogue about waking up to reality and finding himself. And this goes on for quite some time. The end of his dialogue is, quote, "If I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, then I am not I, and you are not you." In case you're curious, don't worry, Oscar Wilde said it a little bit shorter, and I think even better. Be yourself, everyone else is taken. Meaning sometimes we even try to be other people because we think that we are not happy with who we are, and we go off into our own delusions further. Denial, by the way, it doesn't just happen on an individual level. In my marriage and family therapy class, I learn about family myths, and those stories that families tell each other about the idea that you can't do certain things or act a certain way. Denial can be a communal problem in that we refuse to acknowledge injustices, we refuse to see the challenges can actually be overcome, we even fail to address inequalities. And on a societal or global scale, how we look at denial, I think, comes out in the experience of tackling the problem of climate change and political polarization. Denial breeds apathy. Denial teaches us that individuals have the capacity to make a difference, but globally, maybe not. Communally, maybe not. Family-wise, maybe not. I'll just stay where I'm at. Abraham's journey, I think, or my telling of it this evening, reminds us that our actions, whether faithful or flawed, carry weight and they carry consequences. That it's up to us to, in fact, combat denial. That sometimes we, in fact, need to be each other's angels. We need to do it with love. We need to do it with compassion. But sometimes we need to challenge not just others' apathy, but our own. I would think, too, of Abraham. It took balance for him to find reality. And he risked many things. And I also think, too, of Isaac and the damage that it caused. I want to share again the idea of balance and faith. In each of the areas that Abraham walked, the challenge lies in finding faith in that balance. Faith can offer us hope. We can find faith in optimism. Faith can give us strength and inspire us to move forward. But it must, of course, be paired with an understanding of reality. Without this balance, we risk becoming like Abraham, stuck in his delusion, moving forward with certainty, but missing the pressing needs of those around us. And so maybe we need to go forward by asking ourselves questions of what truths am I avoiding in my personal relationships or responsibilities? Are there problems with my family, community, society, etc.? And what's one step that I can actively take to address this? Denial can, in fact, make our lives simpler, easier, but they ultimately distance us from our truer selves. We forget that I am I and you are you. Rather, we live in the other space of a dream. We can distance ourselves from God, too, by making us feel alone. We can distance ourselves from community. Abraham's story, my midrash, reminds us of the pain denial can cause, but also the possibility of growth once reality is, in fact, able to break through. As we reflect on our lives, let's not wait for angels to intervene. Let's have the courage to confront our reality, to find an authentic self, and to build a life rooted in truth. May we have the strength to break through some of our illusions that hold us back and embrace the beauty and challenges of what is real. Shabbat Shalom.